are going to continue on with Hebrews. We are in chapter 11. We've gone through verse 6 so far, but just kind of a pullback, big picture reminder. Hebrews is probably a sermon written down for a group of people to say, Jesus is the best. The world's going to pressure you, but focus on him, because that's where your strength and that's where your energy, your joy, your determination, your grace comes from. It's focusing on him. We're living in a fallen world still. It's still broken, but Jesus is always the answer. So let's spend our efforts focusing on him, spending time with him, and growing more and more to be more and more like him. So this chapter starts off with the definition of faith. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. For by it the people of old received their commendation. So a lot of this chapter where we're going through is talking about examples of people who walked faithfully with God, and he recognized that by his response to them. And so we're going to look to them for understanding faith better and what that means. Remember, faith is our way of accessing the things of the invisible and bring them into the physical realm. God has grace and power and promises he's made to us and joy and all this stuff we're talking about. And our faith is how we pull that into our lives and pull that into like I said, the physical world that we live in. And it's our bodies are the temple. That's where he lives. Our bodies are the transition point, the point between the eternal, because we have the internal, invisible, unseen in us, because we have the Spirit in us, and we were walking in this physical realm. So we are the conduit to bring God into this world, his power and grace. So we've touched on first few examples were God at creation, Abel, and Enoch, and they are examples of faith. And we must. It ends with verse 6 is where we ended last time, and it says, "Without faith it is impossible to please him. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him." So our trust is based on knowing the one and true God. All right. We said must believe that he is not talking about the like atheism versus belief there's a God. We talk about he is because God refers to himself as I am. So it's that same grammar there. We must, when it says believe that he is, it's referring to Yahweh specifically. We need to know the one and true God and have a relationship with him specifically. So that's being referred to there in that picture. So we're creating a picture of faith is, and in this stretch, or well, the author, I believe the author is Paul. That's largely debated on who actually wrote this down or who authored this, but that's what he's trying to communicate to us through this stretch, is what his faith is and how it's lived out, and what God responds to and how he responds to it. So these are examples, but the true message here is really about God. It's not, we're looking to these people as kind of shadows, of forerunners of how to walk these things, how it looks as a human to walk in faith and to step in line, walking side by side with God. But the truth is really God. It's his grace and his faithfulness that they are tying into. And so the first ones we talked about God at creation, and we talked about Abel, and we talked about Enoch. And there's no negatives proposed in any of these stories on those people. God's God. He created everything. And Abel, he lived his life, he offered a good sacrifice, and Cain was jealous, killed him for it. Enoch wasn't so connected to God that he just went right on into heaven, didn't have to go through the process of death. And we're going to get into and see more and more of these examples. These aren't perfect people. This isn't like, I live my life exactly like this guy and I got it all right. No. There's principles here. There's important points we're going to cover, but it's not about living perfectly. There's a lot of grace and mercy in God's description of these people, looking back at them, and he's glossing over a lot of stuff. So we're going to touch on some of that stuff to make the point for us to not think of ourselves as disqualified because we've messed up somewhere along the line, because that's not how God works, as we'll see. I was reading an article. This woman, Carmen Imes, she's a good source for a lot of this Old Testament stuff. But she wrote an article, and this quote was, "In my younger years, I envisioned faith as a kind of counterfactual wishful thinking. But faith is not optimism with a religious cloak on. Faith is rooted in God's own promise." So this idea of faith a lot of times is presented as we're just believing in this, like, it's like the same as just believing in fairies or this, like, this imaginary thing, and you just decided to believe in it, and it's all just this stuff in your head. And we have evidence. God has given us a book that shows how he's interacted with the world and how he works with us. And we have actual experience ourselves in our hearts. We've connected with God. We've seen him do good things. We've seen miracles. And this isn't just, like I said, it's not, as she said, it's not optimism with a religious cloak. It's based on a promise. It's on multiple promises God has given to us. And we have our eyes, and that's the encouragement in this book, is to look ahead, look to the future, because that will give you strength to go through whatever you got to go through today. And our faith is in our God as we look ahead to those promises. It's not for the fun things we're going to get, the good things we're going to get. Our faith is trusting in our God who will provide that place for us, who wants to be in relationship with us. And that's our focus. And we can look back through the Word and through our lives to see ways that God has given us given points to look at. He's given us like not solutions, okay, I'm trying to think of the right phrasing. The big goal, ultimate eternity with him. We all live together with him. He's given us in this life now, many examples that are leading us to believe that he is going to fulfill his promise. If it's sort of like a down payment on a promise. I guess there's an example. So, what was that? Yeah, deposit. There's a good word. For some reason, the words are escaping me. God's given us deposits on the promises. He sent Jesus, and so much is already fulfilled in him. Like, he's done all the work. But these people, especially what we're looking at, these people didn't have Jesus to look back to like we do. We have, and live with currently, because it fundamentally changes the way we live on this earth, besides what's going on in eternity, in our future eternity. These people are living without hardly any visual evidence that God is going to ultimately do these things that he's promised. As they live their lives, God shows himself faithful and proves it out. And so, how much more so, we can look at those examples and say, they stuck to God. They stuck with it. They walked through the life as they saw it. But how much more so now that we can look back to Jesus? We can look at the things that God has already done and look to our future and increase our faith based on believing in that and believing that. They didn't believe the promise. They believed in the one who made the promise. Another quote I came across was, "Trust in God based on divine revelations that well, this is a definition for faith. I want to clarify that. Because I don't think we can ever fully define faith in one. I mean, we have Hebrews 11:1, and that's a good starting point, but there's just so much more to it. So I want to keep building on that idea of faith as we go through this. So this definition of faith: trust in God based on divine revelation that results in tangible expressions of obedience. Our trust is based on what God has revealed of himself to us. We have the word, we have this walk where we can interact with him. He chooses to interact. We take steps and he responds. And this life is not one to just passively float through. It's one to pursue, to push into him, to give him opportunities to show himself more and more real, that we can grow closer and closer to him and continue to walk closer and closer with him. This is not at all a decision and then live my life however I want to. We've covered this multiple times again. I just want to reiterate the desire for God to continually go closer and closer and closer to us, and what kind of lives we can live if we are pressing it more and more into him. It's not this super serious, but it is serious at the same time. It's that intention. It's that willingness to put ourselves in positions where he has to come through, or it's not going to happen. It's our willingness to put ourselves out there because we know he's faithful. In relationships, we can come up with lots of examples. There's in finances, in just our what we're choosing to believe for and what we do with our lives, and the steps we can take day in and day out. God will reveal himself as we push in. But he's not holding back. It's us growing more and more intentional and open and willing and, I guess, even skilled in hearing his voice and connecting with him and trusting in him. A lot of that is just through our understanding. All right. I have spent a lot of time on the intro, so it's about the pursuit of God. So verse 7, we are going to get into Noah. I did put that in there. All right, so verse 7. By faith, Noah, being warned by God concerning events as yet unseen, in reverent fear constructed an ark for the saving of his household. By this he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. So this is referring back to the Noah story, which is Genesis 6 through 9, and then his genealogy follows in chapter 10. So 6:9 lays out, these are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. And in chapter 7, verse 1, it says, then the Lord said to Noah, go into the ark, you and all your household, for I have seen that you are righteous before me in this generation. So God clearly thought pretty highly of Noah. He was in a world that we don't completely understand how the physical earth operated, because the Bible's not there to lay it out. But it appears the water cycle was different, and he built an ark, which apparently he built this huge boat, and apparently there was no water nearby, and there hadn't been rain, and so this is such a completely foreign concept to the people of the time and to him, and he spent decades of his life committed to this what seems like a ridiculous plan because of God's promise to him. God gave him a warning and a challenge, a plan, and he was willing, in spite of everything around him, pretty much, besides the voice of God, looking like this plan didn't make much sense. And he was willing to push through because he believed in God and his promise. And it's interesting that the focus is entirely on Noah in the way he's described as a righteous man. But he went into the ark with his whole family. And so the emphasis here is his looking forward. And all these examples are, the idea is we're looking forward. Whatever is happening in front of us, we know our future is guaranteed because the only one that can be trusted in this universe is God, and he promises a good future to us. And anything else is just putting our trust in something that it may feel like a good job, it may feel like you're healthy now, or whatever, but none of those things can be trusted in. Only he can truly make all things work to good. Everything else is kind of luck of the draw when it comes down to it, in a lot of ways, which is scary if you don't know him and you don't know his heart and how much he wants to love and care for us. But so this idea of who Noah is, I'll read 1 Peter 3, 18-20, because we have some other books talking about Noah. So, for Christ also suffered once for sins, the righteous for the unrighteous, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit, in which he went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison, because they formerly did not obey, when God's patience waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was being prepared, in which a few, that is 8 persons, were brought safely through water. So These people, in a lot of ways, are also, they contain elements of describing who Jesus is. And Noah is a picture that gives us more insight into who Jesus is and who he was and what he did for us. So there's this comparison where there was this judgment coming, and Noah, the righteous man, was able to save his family, was able to bring them through safely in this ark. And so we have this parallel too, where Jesus came, it was a time of judgment, and he was able to bring his family safely to the end, and that the ark symbolically here is the church. We are the family that gets to go along for the ride because the one was righteous. And that's our Jesus, because he loved us and so on. Jesus said he will build his church, and the gates will not prevail against us. And just the same way as Noah built his ark, and the storm waters could not prevail against the boat because it was able to rise up over and overcome. So our faith in Jesus will lead to our deliverance. It does lead to our deliverance. This line, the phrase being warned by God. Noah is the first one we're going to review here that was given a promise. And this idea is prevalent again, our focus is on God, the one who makes the promise, because he's trustworthy in him. But the idea of having something to focus on, something to look to, that we know God has said to us for our future, gives us something to focus on and strengthen us as we live through life together. And so Noah is the first one that has been given this promise, given a promise that he'll be rescued if he follows this plan. And so as we go through life, we have the word. We have so much that's already laid out for us. We know the end is good. But also, there are specifics for our individual lives that aren't necessarily laid out specifically in the Bible. And that And God wants to talk to each of us individually. He has specific purposes and plans for our lives. And we are going to struggle to have clarity and our understanding on them if we're not pressing in to Him to hear clearly and take steps and take the step that we know is in front of us to do and see how God's going to reveal his plan and purpose for our lives. Because a life lived like day by day where you can say, I followed God today and look what He did. And I followed God and then tomorrow I'm going to do the same thing. And look how amazing it is. And look how much closer I've grown in. And look at all the great things that He has done in me and through me. And the kind of exciting life that would be for everyone if they were to tie into that. And that's what He's looking for. You have that relationship, you have that closeness, but you have that encouragement of seeing Him come through again and again because we're putting ourselves out there for Him, for the people around us, for the world around us so that we can demonstrate Him, we can show how good He is, we can connect with Him and tell people how gracious and faithful and what a joyful life it is to live like this with Him. That's why we press in. I mean, even if we said the prayer and we pretty much believe, that's not enough. That's not the life then you're just going through the motions with everyone else in this culture, riding the wave of politics and economics and all this other crap. We can float above that. We can be completely independent of the leverage that holds against us, the authority that we're bucking against. This, we can have so much grace and peace to flow through life and be overcoming victors, of being change agents, to being excited, just powerful people that demonstrate His love. That's the life we want to live. That's the pressing in. And that comes from the relationship. It's not about doing the things and being able to heal someone. I mean, that'd be fantastic, and I would be super encouraged if as that happens to me. And it has. I prayed for people, and God has worked, and that's been fantastic. And think about that time. I'm guessing pretty much everyone at some point has prayed for something and it came true. How encouraging is that? That God used you, and He actually works in our world. Make that a daily, a moment-to-moment way of living, instead of just sagging back and then feeling pressure for something and then trying to get your faith worked up or whatever you think you have to do in that moment because you feel disconnected, because you haven't been walking that way. It's not true. God didn't leave us in those moments. He's still there. You look at the Israelites, He bailed them out over and over and over again despite of their crappy attitudes. But that's not the way He wants us to walk this out. He wants us to be able to be no, I've seen my God do this. I want to be the guy who I think it was, I was reading about Mueller, I think it was. He's on a ship, and he's going to a speaking session or something. He's going to some meetings, and he's on a ship trying to get somewhere, but the ship's been sitting in fog for a day, and it just can't go anywhere. There's too much fog, they can't go ahead. And so he goes up to the captain, and he's like, I've never missed a meeting before. We're not going to miss a meeting, so just be ready. I'm going to pray. Well, let's go pray, I think he said. And so he went, and the captain went with him, and he prayed. And the captain's like, Mueller prayed, and then the captain's like, I'll pray too. And he's like, you don't have to. I know God's never let me down, never will. And the captain's like, this is ridiculous. We're in fog. It's never going to go anywhere. And so Mueller said, no, you'll go out, and the fog's gone. They open the door, the fog's gone. That is how I want to live my life. I want to know God's voice in the moment, His truth, and to be able to say, like Jesus did, be healed. There's no doubt about it. There's no I'm going to pray for a while, hopefully something happens. That's not the way. I don't want to live that way. I've lived that way. I want to grow past that. And I believe we all want to grow past that. But that takes intention on our part to grow into that. God's right there ready to do it for every one of us. We're holding ourselves back by limiting ourselves and being passive and things like that. So we have promises from God. We have truth from Him. Let's walk in those. Push forward in those. Look to Him fulfilling those so that we can be the vessel that carries us, as many as we can, into eternity with Him. All right, so I go to example from Noah. It says, a reverent fear he constructed an ark. His humility led to obedience. He understood how he fit in the picture with God. He understood all he has is through God. I'm going to trust you, God. I'm going to build this boat because you told me to, and he's got the resources. He probably, in his humanness, probably thought this is stupid. Like, what am I doing here? I got some plans to build something that's never existed before with no water nearby and all that. But because he recognized, relative to God, God knows everything and I don't. I'm going to trust him. I'm going to do that. He obeyed because God said to. And that's walking in faith. It's regardless of what we feel, regardless of what we see, we follow his voice. We follow his truth. We look in the Word. It's in the Word, we do it. We don't have to pray about it if it clearly says do something. But he also has, that closeness can help us clarify what individual steps we are also to be taking. And it said it led to the salvation of his whole family. Our life lived can. I don't know that we can pray and change anyone's mind. I think God seems to be willing to let people make their own decisions, regardless. But the way we live our lives can certainly be a path to salvation for our families, and we can call the right people into their lives, and we can live in a way. God knows the right things to say when we don't. God knows the right things to do when we don't. And the closer, more in tune we are with him, the more we can make those choices without necessarily even realizing we're saying the right thing or doing the right thing, because we're walking in his grace in all that we do. And then it says he condemned the world. That language is kind of harsh, but basically it was example of his righteousness compared to where the world was. And he was saved and the rest of the world wasn't. So that's pretty much it. What that means by the condemnation there. Because he lived by faith. So the interesting thing here we're getting to here is, this is our first example that has a negative point in his story. After Noah's family comes through in the ark, and he saves humanity. God saves humanity through him. What does he do? I want to fill these stories out partially, just so people know the stories. Huh? Yeah, and he gets drunk. He builds a vineyard. Yeah. I'm going on the negative part of the story. Yes, he built an altar, worshiped God. God put the rainbow in the sky as a sign he would never flood the earth again. All that. But then after, they go on to live their lives after this big, exciting event, and he gets off track. Maybe he didn't have that purpose anymore, that driving, like, I'm building the ark because this is the thing God has me to do. That's conjecture. But so he builds a vineyard, and the Bible says he gets drunk. And the way the story is written, from what I've read a fair amount about this, and I believe this is the correct interpretation of the story. But the way it's written, it's in verse 22. What's that? Genesis. That would be 9, I think. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father, and told his two brothers outside, which is sort of a weird thing, but it also doesn't, I don't know, I'll clarify this. So, saw the nakedness of his father. There's multiple ways people have interpreted this thing over time. What actually happens here, Ham is his son. He's Ham, Shem, and Japheth. He's got 3 sons. So it says Ham saw his father's nakedness, and then he told his brothers, and then his brothers honorably come back in and cover him up, and that's the way the story is written. But if you read Leviticus 20:11, it clarifies some of this terminology. It says, if a man lies with his father's life, he has uncovered his father's nakedness. Both of them shall be surely put to death. Their blood is upon them. So this uncovered the nakedness thing is more a euphemism than a direct thing. So what I believe happened, what I think we can take from this story, is that Ham slept with his father's wife, his mother. And that explains because after that, Noah curses Canaan, who is Ham's son. He doesn't curse Ham, he curses Canaan, his son. Canaan being the name of the country where we're going to end up with, where Israel is. So it kind of makes sense of the story in that regard, like what happens there. So it's interesting, like immediately after God cleanses the world, the next thing that happens is this sinful event. And partially I want to tell you that because I think it's just good to know the whole story. We're going to work through, and I just want to spell out the stories to make sure we're remembering all the things, and we know what's going on. But again, we read in Hebrews this picture of Noah the righteous man, but we also see there's a flawed human there. And God still can look at him and see he saw the promise. He had a relationship with me. We lived this life together. He lived faithfully to me. Yes, he had some failings. He screwed up and it caused some problems. And he probably didn't handle it well and all that. But that didn't disqualify him. There's still, we don't want to make mistakes because they have ramifications and lots of ramifications in our life. The nation of Canaan was a pagan, bad place and had to be conquered, and people killed and died over this. Like the descendants of this line, it wasn't great for them. It wasn't great for anyone involved, really, and a lot of that could have been avoided, I think, if this error hadn't been. If Ham hadn't tried to take over. By doing this, he would have been trying to take control of the family and run the family by being. That was the dynamics going on. What his motivations probably would have been there. But again, we can mess up. We don't want to mess up, but God is gracious, and he's not focused on your mistakes. His focus is we tend to get on them. That's not his focus. If we're willing to turn, recognize our ways, and turn back to him, we can move on with him. And God's gonna, big picture, he didn't say, oh yeah, remember when Noah screwed up? He said, no, remember, Noah was a righteous man. He walked with me, and look to him as an example of the way he lived his life. So that's the way we want to look at it, but also be aware. We can mess up, but he's gracious. All right, so we see aspects of Jesus in all these ones we've seen, and that was Noah's. Let's move on to Abraham in verse 8. So I'll read verses 8 through 12 at this point. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive an inheritance. And he went out, not knowing where he was going. By faith, he went to live in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose designer and builder is God. By faith, Sarah herself received power to conceive even when she was past age, since she considered him faithful who had promised. Therefore, for one man, and him as good as dead, were born descendants as many as the stars of heaven, as many as the innumerable grains of sand by the seashore. Okay, so the next story as we work through Genesis actually is the Tower of Babel, but I don't think there's anything really redeeming and faithful about that, so I think we just got to skip over there. So next we have Abraham. Remember, though in the story of Babel, the world is divided. God confuses the languages, so there's lots of languages. Everyone separates into their own countries, and God assigns spirits, gods, angels, whatever terminology you want to use, to different areas of the world, and those are the ones that are supposed to watch over the people that live in that area. And then he creates a whole new nation, through Abraham. And so Abraham is the story of the beginnings of God's new people, and God is going to be the God that watches over this group, because he wants to show the world what it's like to really follow the one and true God. These are all other underling spirits. No one is actually competing with God. He is still the almighty creator. He created all these other beings. There's nothing even close to competing with him. They are just other created beings that spiritually watch over these other, and then they end up falling because they accept the worship for themselves and stuff like that, where we get all these evil forces and powers and principalities and all that. But we'll keep moving. So the Abraham story is covered in Genesis 11 to 25. He's, again, the first of God's people. So the sequence of the Abraham story, just so we're all on the same page. He and his family originally live in Ur. Then his father and him and his nephew moved to Haran. I think I have a map on the next slide, if I'm correct. So Ur of Chaldea, so way in the bottom right, you see Ur under Chaldea. That's where they're from originally. That we'll get to in a second. And then Haran is way up where it says Assyria at the top, and then they end up coming back down. Everyone tends to mostly skirt the desert in the middle there anyway. But they lived in Haran for a while, and then they end up going down to Canaan. So Abraham's father moves them to Haran. They live in Haran until his father dies. Then God calls them to Canaan. They go down to Canaan initially. There's a famine. They go down to Egypt for a little bit. This is the first time Abraham lied to protect himself, lies that his wife is his sister, and then the Pharaoh takes her to be his wife, and then God stops that, and the Egyptians bless him in spite of his. It says Abram goes to Egypt. It doesn't say God sent Abram to Egypt. So I think that whole excursion was not of God's will, but it's not verified one way or the other. So anyway, they go down there and then they come back up. This is where Abraham and Lot have grown so prosperous that they can't live together. So Abram says, pick where you want and I'll take the rest. So Lot takes the Jordan Valley. So you see where Jerusalem is, there. There's the Sea of Galilee, Jordan, Dead Sea. And then Sodom and Gomorrah is on the bottom right of the Dead Sea down there. So that's the area where Lot takes, and then Abram takes the whole middle part of Canaan, which will become Israel. So then the next story is some kings come. We talked about this a while back. Some kings come, they capture Lot, so Abram takes a few of his guys and go back and conquers his king. This is when Melchizedek comes out, and they have communion together, and he worships for that. And this is the first time God makes a covenant with Abraham and talks about his future blessing. Then Sarah thinks it's not going to happen through her, so she suggests Hagar, their servant, an Egyptian slave, as the way that God is going to provide children for Abraham. So probably not Hagar's. We don't really know motivations. The modern take now is that she was an abused slave person, that it was an abusive, and I would probably say it wasn't. I don't think Hagar had any real choice in the matter, probably. But out of that comes Ishmael. Yeah, there's a word. Out of that comes Ishmael, who it's a problematic relationship down the line. But God, because Ishmael is Abraham's seed, God promises to prosper them too. And then the covenant of circumcision is made when Abraham's 86 when Hagar has Ishmael. Then we pick up later when Abram's 99 roughly, and he introduces the concept of circumcision, and that's going to be the sign that they're his people. So Abram and all his family, all the men, get circumcised when Abram's 99, which sounds fantastic. And then there's some visitors who are angels, and probably an early, there's a term I'm drawing a blank on, an early time where God comes to earth as a man, Jesus. There's a theophany, I think is the word I'm looking for. And then Then after that is the Sodom and Gomorrah story with Lot, where he gets too involved with these cities that are evil, and those cities are destroyed by God, and some other poor choices are made. Then Abram meets up with Abimelech, and this is the second time he lies about who his wife is, to try to, out of fearful, trying to protect them, not get himself killed, because they think they'll, again, she's like 90 at this time, so she must have been an attractive woman for the time at that age, but he lied, and in the end, God revealed the truth to Abimelech. Abimelech blessed Abraham in spite of his choices, and then within the year, Isaac is born, and Sarah cannot tolerate the way that's going, so they send Hagar and Ishmael away. So he would have been like 14 at the time. There's a treaty with Abimelech. Then the next thing in the story is Isaac being sacrificed. Well, not actually sacrificed, but God tells Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, and he was going to go through with it, and then we know that God provided another sacrifice. Then Sarah dies. Then Abraham sends to find a daughter for Isaac, goes back up to Haran, which is where Laban, their family, still lives. And then Sarah dies, then that, and then the final part of the story is he has another wife, has at least 6 more kids, and dies at 175. So this is the life of Abraham, just so we're all kind of aware of all the things that are going on here. We get 4 examples here in this stretch where he left her. Is the first one where he says he was called to go out. So that's spelled out in Genesis 12, 1-9. It says, the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land I will show you. I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless you, those who bless you. Him who I dishonors, I will curse, and all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So an interesting thing about them being called out of Ur is that essentially is tied to Babylon. You see where it is in the world, and Babylon is the country that takes Judah away into exile down the line, and they are the city Ur, the Chaldeans, is actually a Sumerian city. The kids may remember Sumer, a song way back when. This is like the first huge city of the world. It's tied to technology and education and finance and trade and industry, like textiles, all these things. And there's this they found it, and there's this massive temple, ziggurat, which is like their early pyramids. And so Abram and his family were probably wealthy. They were part of this world system, and they were probably living there was like decent sized housing and indoor plumbing. Like, this was a nice way to live at this point in history, and this is what they were called out of. This is his background, and they were willing to leave all that behind and go into a new place and wander around in tents, because they knew their God. Abram knew his God, and he was willing to leave all that security and comfort behind by faith. It says, and he went out not knowing where he was going. You could more clearly say that as soon as Abraham called, he obeyed. There was no hesitancy in Abraham. He knew his God because he walked with him and was willing to be in uncomfortable positions to live based on what his future held, based on the God he knew, the God he received the promise from. And we're out of time. there's a lot of talk about anxiety and discomfort and stuff in life today, and I don't have a lot of time to get into that, but it's becoming more and more pervasive. Is that's dictating people's lives now? They walk in fear. They don't feel like they can handle any kind of stress or discomfort or anything put on them relationally or that, and that's a hard way to live. We should be compassionate for that. But we have the answer here. The answer is we have an anchor. We have a promise. We have a God who we can lean on whenever things feel overwhelming, whenever things feel difficult. And that's how we can get through life. And rather than sit in judgment, try to seek God and how we can be an encouragement to know that we have that answer for the world. It's just getting compounded more and more. It's the internet, everyone's just reiterating it over and over and over again, and it's just become this ingrained thought. I'm not sure if you're fully aware of this or not. The younger generations are in stress constantly. They're anxious all the time. And like we can look to Abraham and say he was willing to be in stress and discomfort and live in a strange place where he did not belong, because it's not the world he came from and it wasn't the world he was headed to. But he was willing, because of his trust in God, that God would get him through, and willing to put himself through that stress for the future, for his family, for his, for humanity. But I just feel like that's something God needs to be speaking through us today, is peace and persistence and drive and purpose all come from our relationship with him. And we have that, I said. We have that answer. So seek ways that God can use you to communicate that to the world around him. Verse 9, by faith he went to live in a land of promise, as in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs with him of the same promise. Again, he was willing to live as a foreigner. Sojourn, that word, is used in the Genesis example, or the Genesis story, and when it's laid out, he was willing to live in a land without the rights of ownership or citizenship. He was willing to put himself out there and be exposed to not be able to really build anything for the future, because that's not how God wanted to live. God wanted to live day by day in faith, trusting him, and grow in that relationship and that dynamic for him, because ultimately, what's better, a nice house or a close communion with God who's able to work all things for good for him? So he didn't get so much the benefits of living in this promised land during his lifetime, and Isaac and Jacob didn't either, until the nation went to Egypt and then came back and conquered it and was able to actually live in the land and live in the buildings and live in the city and create and have their permanent land. They were just living there in their tents. They were wandering here and there wherever was good land, and they were willing to live that lifestyle out as an example for how good their God was and how willing he was and able to take care of them. They weren't looking to, I said, they weren't looking to nice houses where they were. They were looking to God's future city that was promised to them. They were not conformed to the world. They were transformed. And then let's go through, I guess, verse 10, and then I guess we can wrap it up here. For he was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose designer and builder is God. The tense of this verb is called the imperfect tense, and it's the looking forward part it's habitual, it's continual. It's not, I had a nice thought once. It's that idea of pressing, of not settling, not getting comfortable with wherever we are in our relationship with him, but be able to continue to grow closer and closer and grow in our relationship, grow in our confidence in hearing his voice, and grow in our confidence in taking whatever step we know him to be revealing to us. And so the contrast here is they're living in tents, and this city that God is designing and building for them has foundations. There's permanence there. They were living life, going through, and this is a picture of how we are in this world. We're not citizens of this earth anymore, of this physical realm anymore, now that we are God's people. We are here to be here with that mindset. Like, I'm not gonna buy a teepee or anything and live our family. Even the camper was a nice short-term venture, but I don't want to go back to that. There's something nice about having a permanent place to go home to. Like, it's nice to have your space. It's nice to have your space. But if our trust and our confidence and our rest is in whatever feels permanent in this world, because we have a nice job or a retirement or a nice house or wherever we look to find our stability and comfort in, if we're looking to that, then we're missing the point. We're not living a life of trust and faith like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that we're looking back to. And if we are putting our trust in those things can be damaged. You got physical damage like natural disasters or fires. Things can happen to houses, but like whatever feels economically safe to you can change on a dime. Like, we know that. We've seen the world flip, all that thing. And again, anything we're putting our trust in this physical realm, if that's where we're finding our peace, that's dangerous. If that's where we're comfortable, that's dangerous. Our trust comes from our continual communication and trust in and obedience to the voice of God. And anything else, as safe as it can feel in the moment, is not safe. But he is. So, there is a great future for us, and there is a great life to be lived between now and then. A life filled with joy and peace and growth and excitement and God revealing himself to us if we live the way he asks us to. And he asks us to not for his own benefit, but because he knows what's best for us. He knows what would truly make us fulfilled. And let's pursue that together. So let's worship him and take this time to thank our God and just push in closer to him.